Hello and welcome to part 3 of the Easy Parallax tutorial video series. In this video, we'll be covering how to add parallaxing elements to Easy Parallax without using tags, by dragging and dropping in your objects from the hierarchy. This allows us to control the spawning distance between our objects, and we'll get into how to do that as well. First off, let's take a look at these foreground objects that we have here, these trees and rocks. If we run the game, we can see how these spawn. They're spawning right next to each other, even though they are duplicated, so it seems a little different at first. It's actually the exact same pattern. You know, the objects are spawning right next to each other. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to change this and see if we can fix that with the features that Easy Parallax offers. The first thing I'm going to do, just for the sake of making this tutorial a little more clear here, is delete these excess foreground rocks and foreground trees. So see, here's our single foreground rock, and here's our single foreground tree. As you can see, they still have their parallax wrap tags on them, but we can take those off because we're going to add them to the parallaxing elements list manually. If you did leave those tags on by mistake, it's okay, Easy Parallax will just ignore them, but I like to take them off just for organizational purposes. We know right now that we want to add at least 2 parallax elements to the parallaxing list, but I'm just going to add 5 so we have a couple extra to play around with, or 6, or 5. But you can type in a number there for the size, or you can also add and remove with these buttons here. The buttons come in handy when you have added a lot of things to the list and you don't want to accidentally type in a number and erase the rest of your list. So you can use the buttons to just add and remove from the last element on the list. But anyhow, we'll start by dragging in the rock and tree. So I'll drag in the rock, and if I hover over the first parallaxing element, you can see that it automatically expands. Drop onto the parallaxing object slot, and as you can see, the name of the parallaxing element on the list actually changes to match what it was that you dropped in. Next, we're going to drop in the tree. Same thing, the name is changed. Okay, so if we were to start and run this now, you would just see one of each. You'd run off the screen, it would stay there. So we want to get it to spawn duplicates and wrap like we had it set before with the tags. And you do that by toggling these checkboxes here. As you can see, when you hit this checkbox, you get a units between dupes field. This is the distance in Unity units between each of the game objects spawned from this parallaxing element. So be sure to keep those units in mind going forward. So for our rocks, let's put it to, let's say 40. This is a pretty big scene, so I need a lot of Unity units to spread them out. For the trees, let's do like 60. And if we'll run this, there's our first rock. Notice they're not on top of each other anymore. They're much more spread out. There's a tree. There's another rock. Now, next time you see one of those guys, they're going to be in slightly different places. So yeah, there's a rock, and there's the tree. Now, this is great and all, but these are rocks and trees we're talking about. They should be randomly placed, right? Well, it just so happens that Easy Parallax will let us do that. So, let's go ahead and randomize the distance these guys are spawning. Let's expand the rock and the tree again. There's this randomized distance option here. If we check that, the other field will go away, and you get this min units between and max units between. So let's say that we don't want rocks to be any less than 7 units between each other, but the max units could be 40. And we'll leave this guy at a set 60, just so we can compare. So let's run that. So we've got a rock there. Tree, rock right next to it. There's another rock. Actually, our spawn distances are pretty spread out, so it might be kind of hard to tell how random this is. But let's see if we back out here and take a look. So yeah, see? We have 3 rocks in a row right here, but then there's a big gap there with the 2 rocks there. Big gap. Another big gap, so it's randomly selecting the positions of each of these. And if I were to keep running forward and turn around and go backwards, it actually maintains the history of where it spawned all these objects. So you're not going to get things randomly spawning in different positions. Things will be as the player first experienced them when they were running forward. So there you have it. That's how you control the distance spawning and how you can set it to random. So right now might be a good time to talk about the private properties of each of these parallaxing elements that we see on the side here. So all of these obviously can be tweaked. The distances, the private speed scalars, we'll get into that stuff in a later video. But if you want to manually control any of these properties, you need to keep in mind that you need to add the elements to the parallaxing elements list manually and not use the tags. The tags are there to be used on objects that you don't really need to set any private properties for. So like your default parallax or wrapping without any distance. So keep that in mind when working on your own stuff. Just to clean this up, I'm going to use this button, remove the last 3, and there we go. So this guy's good to go. So thank you for watching, and be sure to watch the next video where we'll be talking about motorization.